Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing? I'm Harris Rosen, and I'm the co-founder of CareerPathIntelligence.com. Got Adam Fisher here today. Adam is a licensed insolvency trustee and the man that everybody wants to hear from today, unfortunately. I won't read out his biography, which you can find on our website, but if you want to understand Adam's philosophy about money, watch him play tennis, and I'm being dead serious about that. He is among Canada's top tennis players. He's economical, effective, and mostly disciplined. Now, before we get into Adam's presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about Career Path Intelligence and our mandate. Career Path Intelligence has a career guidance focus, and you can go to our site for more, but we are focused on socially motivated speakers and sustainable development. And that's why I have Adam here. He's helped a lot of people get their life back. There's no other way to say that, even prior to this awful pandemic. The pandemic that we're all going through has decimated small businesses and many larger ones. It has also forced government to spend, at all levels, by the way, to spend money which I surmise they don't have. So COVID-19 has, needless to say, affected all of us. It's devastating. The impact on educational institutions, investor groups, unregulated businesses, it goes far beyond that which is pecuniary. Let's talk about student loan debt for a second. Crippling student loan debt was a problem in Canada and the United States long before COVID-19. And so now what? So if you are a student tuning in today, I want you to take careful notice of the economic principles underlying Adam's slides. I took a look at them yesterday. They're just awesome. There's no other word for it. Financial literacy for students is still, in my humble opinion, conspicuous by its absence in both Canada and the United States. And you know, it's not too late for us to turn that around. Technology and an aging labor force have also created a dire demographic situation for the 40 plus and 50 plus cohorts. We're an upside down financial pyramid in both Canada and the United States by virtue of having an aging labor force. And on that note, tune in with us on June 3rd, because I'm going to have California's John Warner with me. John is a stalwart supporter and startup investor in the 40 plus and 50 plus sector, a true original. So today, Adam's going to present for about 40, maybe 45 minutes. And he's going to do that while attendees are muted to limit background noise for all of you. But we will take written questions through your chat function after that. And you can start entering those questions at any time, okay? This session, stuff the lawyers made us put in, this session does not constitute legal advice, and we are being recorded. It is now my pleasure to turn this over to Adam. And Adam, I'm really glad that we're not on the tennis court. I had to say that. Good afternoon.
Okay, well, thank you, Harris, and thank you, Career Path Intelligence, for having me today. I'm excited to share with you the presentation in this really unusual time. And I do have to say, with following up with what Harris was saying, was that he always makes my tennis sound better than it is. But over the last couple months, I've only been able to play tennis against the wall, and I haven't even won a point so far. So in any event, let's move on to the presentation. It's based on averting financial disaster during COVID-19. So the agenda is here. I'm going to introduce you to me and my company, and discuss the unprecedented impact of COVID-19, the current insolvency trends. I think you might be interested to know, what's happening in the insolvency market, because everyone keeps on asking me how busy we are. And we are busy, but it might be unexpected that the insolvencies are a bit of a lagging factor, and ultimately will come later in the fall. I want to talk about, if you or someone has a company with debt problems, what a plan of action might be, and what factors you need to consider. We're going to discuss restructuring options, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what a licensed insolvency trustee is. That's what LIT stands for, and how you become one. And then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A. So first slide, I like to have at least one cartoon in every presentation, but you can see this one. They're drowning in insolvents, and the person says, let's not overreact, we're insolvent, not bankrupt, so they can still restructure. So our firm was founded in the 1960s. We have 11 regional offices, and we focus strictly on insolvencies, and we do small and medium-sized businesses, and we also do consumer filings. And our clients range from the tier 1 banks to any sort of individuals. And one of the things I want to point out is like Harris said, we love helping people and helping businesses, and we are always available for phone calls, and we do a free consultation. And there's nothing one of the best things that you can do if you're concerned about your financial situation, be it commercial or personal, is to discuss it and to understand your options, because the knowledge is the power to fix what avails you. In the top right hand corner, that's an old picture of me. I just wanted to tell you that I began my career in insolvency on March 31st of 2003, and my first client was Air Canada. And during this COVID crisis, it seems to be full circle, because once again, we're wondering what's going to happen with not only Air Canada, but every airline across the world, and all the industries that the airline supports. So it's quite an incredible time. But basically, I spent 8 years working at a national firm in insolvency, and now I've been at 12 years at Harrison Partners, and working with small and medium-sized businesses and individuals. And basically, the slide's not showing up perfectly, but basically our process is to look at the problem or understand the problem, gather information, typically through a free consultation, to strategize, and then to work with the creditors and give you some breathing space in order to work out something that's mutually beneficial for you or the creditors. And what we hope on the other side is that you have a business that is primed for growth. So the next little bit we're going to be talking about is this unprecedented situation. And I think it all boils down to that there's immense uncertainty of conducting business in the pandemic. There's businesses that can't operate because they're not essential. There's businesses that probably can't operate because people don't want to go to their premises anymore. Gyms come to mind, restaurants, as Harris said, I need a haircut. So any hair salons, anybody that does nails, they're really, really being hurt by this. And the question is, what's going to come on the other side? And there's immense uncertainty to figuring out what might be on the other side. and I put some of the questions down, but when will the restrictions on operating businesses end? Well, we know that at least in Ontario, there's some partial reopenings occurring now, which is positive, but it's done in a great amount of uncertainty because we don't know when the pandemic will end, whether there's going to be a second wave and we're going to have to consider staying at home once again. I know for private career colleges, and I know of many of you that are joining here are working in that business or are running private career colleges. We're hugely dependent on students being able to travel to Canada to get work visas, or sorry, to get study visas. And actually, we're hugely dependent on people traveling regardless of where you are. I don't think of Toronto as the greatest tourism city in the world, but certainly a huge amount of our GDP comes from tourism, and it's gone across Canada. So that's very scary. But with respect to student visas, I think Harris had told me, and I could be wrong on the numbers, but I think he said that 400,000 students come from abroad to study in Canada. And you just think about that, the impact on that on the career colleges, but not only the career colleges, on every sort of sector, from the spaces they need to rent, the food they eat, and all the consumption that they do. It's really something. And that leads to the next one, which is the next point, which is when will consumers come back? I mean, it's anybody's guess, but if you're like me, you're bringing all your groceries at home, you're avoiding stores, and the normal things you'll do in the summer where you spend a lot of your money, you're no longer spending any money. It's pretty much been food, grocery, having a roof over our head, and other necessities, but we're going into our needs, but not much beyond our needs. It's basically the wants are for next year or when this virus is over. So real important questions for businesses. One is if your business has had your revenue decline significantly, or if you're unable to run your businesses, is what will the landlord do? There's lots of businesses out in Canada that can't pay rent right now, or are conserving cash and not paying rent, hoping that they'll be able to work with their landlord. And I can say that our experience is that the landlords have been mixed. I think their first priority is to see as if they can get the rent now, and the second is to defer the rent. Only after that are they considering the government plan where the government provides 50% of the rent, so long as the landlord eats 25% and the tenant pays the other 25% of the rent. And you know, I think some people are surprised to find out that the landlords aren't always open to such a scenario, because they want to look to recover all their rent where they can. Another issue is whether lenders will relax the restrictions and be open to providing more working capital. On the first point, I think lenders will work with their clients, but they're just going to defer what they are owed over time and see if there's a recovery in the future. On the second point, because people are going to need money to reopen their businesses, I find that a very uncertain point, whether we're going to be able to get working capital in the future to run a business. It's really a huge question. I mean, if I had money to lend, I would be very concerned about lending it to a restaurant, a gym, and many other businesses. And that leads to some other questions that one of which really impacts schools, private career colleges, is the social distancing measures that'll be necessary in a work environment, but also in a school. So if the students have to be 6 feet apart, or more, if you're only allowed a certain number of students in a room or whatnot, this will really impact our ability to have the scale necessary to make money. We know that restaurants, although they may be able to open, when we're looking at some of the places that have opened and the allowances for the number of people in any specific space, it's small. I don't know what they're going to do, because I don't, if you're barely getting by based on 100% of your seats, like 1/3 of your seats is not going to cut it. The other question is, how long will the government provide assistance, as they've been doing with the CERB and other assistance for small and medium size and also large companies? Eventually, we have to pay back all the money that the government provides in this emergency, and eventually the government's going to have to transition to going back to normal. But we seem, I don't know if normal is coming soon or long into the future, but something has definitely changed here. So those are really, and I'm sure there's a lot more uncertainties, but those are the primary uncertainties that came to my mind. Since we got a lot of private career colleges, listening into this seminar, I believe that long term there's great opportunity for private career colleges. Some of the things that struck me, and I mean the first one that really struck me, which is the third point or the second point, which is my nephew. My nephew is graduating high school this year, poor guy, and he's been accepted to a number of universities, and the experience, like the universities have made it pretty clear that it's going to be remote learning for the first semester, and it's something that he's not very eager to partake in, and he's considering not going to school and waiting another year, because he wants that experience to be proper. He wants to meet people and all the things that we do at colleges and universities, but those people are also potentially going to be seeking some alternative form of education this year, in this upcoming year, and that presents an opportunity. I think there's huge losses in jobs and industry due to the pandemic, and I think it creates perhaps an unprecedented retraining opportunity, and I think the government at some point will become very attuned to it, and people will be looking for really a link, or you'll be a middle person between where there's demand in the workforce. The private career colleges can hopefully retrain people to meet those demands. And I thought this would be something private career colleges would be on top of or looking forward to in any event, because of the automation of really, I say the key one is driving so much automation in the world. People are going to need retraining, which is really complicated, but that's why we have so many good people in this industry. The other one is that it would be a terrible time to graduate college or university in order to find jobs. I mean, it must be difficult to onboard people, and with companies cutting back, it's hard to believe that they're going to bring in all the people they intended to bring in. Some they will, because your youngest or your newest workers are the cheapest in your workforce. But certainly with that job uncertainty, people will be looking for additional training to make themselves more marketable in the future. So I'm just going to shift the presentation a little bit. I always like to go through what the trends are in insolvency and it's been quite an interesting time. We've seen that due to well, there's a chart here, if you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, which is basically annual insolvencies in Ontario from 2007 to 2019. And if you can see, in 2009, at the height of the Great Recession, there were nearly 70,000 filings. And in Ontario, it actually declined for every year until 2018, where there was a slight bump of insolvencies. And then in 2019, insolvencies increased 13%, which was actually quite puzzling. Because house prices were staying steady and unemployment was at its lowest levels, I believe, at least, since the recession, but probably long before that. And I believe that one of the issues is the incredibly high cost of living, and the other one being the highly reported record levels of consumer debt that has caused people to be, in financial turmoil, and also businesses as well, struggling to look for some way to get out of debt. And that would be the reason for filings increasing in 2019. So one of the big questions is what's going to happen in 2020 due to COVID-19. And really, it's insolvencies actually were quite high into March, and from our friends in the industry, most people are saying that insolvencies actually, when we get the statistics, will have declined significantly in April and May. And it's really because of there's certain factors that cause individuals and businesses to go insolvent. They can't make rent, collections, CRA collections in particular, but other collections, they fall out of line with their lenders, and the lenders start moving in. But all of these processes that cause people to file, they've sort of gone underground. Like collections, the banks aren't doing much collections. CRA's collections, I believe, is not an essential business, and they're not doing any collections right now. Tax deadlines have been increased or have been extended, and there's all sorts of factors, and the government benefits that have kept people afloat. There's numerous factors that have sort of deferred insolvencies, and we're expecting that in the fall and winter of the year, there's going to be an immense increase in insolvencies, and it'll be some of the busiest times ever. That's our guess. But for the time being, really, there's two types of businesses that have been struggling, and we've seen a spike in insolvencies. So one is businesses that just don't work during the pandemic. The two that come to mind are gyms and restaurants. We've been getting lots of queries from them. They're really the ones that we're all avoiding. The other ones are companies that are in trouble already. This has been sort of the final nail in the coffin for those. I can read you some of the ones that have gone bankrupt since the pandemic for various reasons, but Aldo's was the big one. And in the States, certainly Neiman Marcus was and J. Crew was a big one. There's a bunch of developers, real estate developers that have gone bankrupt. And those ones would have already been in trouble. Marche, Foodora, Henry's, Direct Oil and Glass, Solutions, the Container Store, and then a bunch of cannabis companies, Steve Nash Gyms, CanTrust Holdings, which is a cannabis company. So those are some of the ones that have gone together. But really, insolvency filings are a lagging factor, and we'll be able to see the damage of this COVID in the fall and winter of 2020. So the next slide, we're starting to get into the part where we're discussing about what as a business owner, if you're having financial difficulties, what factors you should be looking at. And I think the process starts with an analysis of your business. And the big question for me was, did you have a successful business before COVID-19? Because if you're struggling, if you're a little bit underwater before COVID-19, I think the chances of being able to restructure, having a new business, restructure and sort of, when I say restructure, I think I'd just like to explain that really the key focus of restructuring is, one, getting rid of your debts, and two, making changes that restore profitability. But I think if you're struggling before COVID-19, I don't know if there's much point in trying to figure out how you're going to survive if COVID-19 is impacting you post COVID-19. So you definitely have to analyze what the impact of COVID-19 is on your industry. So if you're a private career college, you may be looking, okay, my revenue stream from international students is gone. Can I pick it up domestically? Will my landlord give me a break, because that's probably your biggest cost? Maybe it was suggested by Julius, who's the technician for, well, I think he's the IT person for Career Path Intelligence and much more than that. It was suggested by him that perhaps landlords would want to take an equity stake in businesses, but this is the kind of creativity that U.S. private career colleges have to figure out. Maybe it's preferred shares, something to defer the payments and give them some sort of benefit if the company becomes profitable. But really, and there's always an issue with the landlord, because depending on who the landlord is, they may have loans that they have to satisfy, and therefore they're going to be pushing their tenants if their insolvency is at risk. The other thing is employees. Definitely, like, everybody is thankful to have work that does at this point, but you may need some assistance from your employees in terms of how much you pay them, and those are difficult conversations, and you may need to right size. You may have lower class sizes if you're a private career college, but across industry, you need to figure out what the impact is of COVID-19 and what the future may look like. And you have to run a lot of different scenarios. You got to think about, you got to, think about if a vaccine came in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, how each one would impact you and how you would get back up on your feet. The other one that's been key is using technology to adapt to changing circumstances. I think private career colleges, depending on what industry you're in, are well suited to use technology, especially with adult students, to make to keep the business afloat. But we all know that many of the businesses require face-to-face, or there's nothing like being face-to-face in a classroom, and there's many businesses, especially things that are applied, that you need to be doing it face-to-face. For instance, you can't run a massage therapy, or I don't think you can run a massage therapy school online. You can only get it so far, but at some point you need to test people's skills. The other thing is the behavior of the customers and students, and I would put the competition in there as well. Like, are they ready to return? Is this going to make them, seek less skilled work to get by? What's the future? And I think the other question really is, I say with private career colleges as an example, is on the other side of this. What are you giving them that will help them in this and on the other side of this? And it comes to mind that I did an insolvency for a company called, for a school called Mobile Dynamics many years ago. And they supplied for Best Buy and Future Shop and all technology companies like that. The know-how people that could, change audio in a car, soup up cars, you think of the Geek Squad, they would supply the people that would be in the Geek Squad. And in the last recession, many of those types of stores closed or were downsized, and all of a sudden there were an excess amount of technicians rather than all along as the industry was growing. There was a huge demand for it, and then the school just fell apart. So it's really important what the demand is on the other side. One of the things that we view as very important, and it's part of our company's philosophy, is really like, this is the first thing we ask when someone has financial difficulties and is considering restructuring or other, insolvency scenarios. And it becomes all about the director. Really the director, the director, we need to know two things. How much do they want to continue the business, and what sort of liabilities that they face within the business. You have to know that there's certain liabilities that a director is responsible for, and the key ones are employee source deductions, HST, and payroll. So if those are growing during this time, that's very bad for your personal liability. There's also guarantees. The most common ones are personal guarantees on secured loans or any business loans. The landlord is another personal guarantee, possibly suppliers. And you need to make sure that you have a way out of them, particularly if you have an asset with a lot of equity, and the main one that we see is houses. The other thing is that business credit cards are personal as well. They're always tied to someone, unless it's a not-for-profit. Not-for-profit ones aren't, but all the other ones, they're tied to an individual. And the final one I want to just point out, there's outstanding wages and your personal loans to the business. But the other thing is this $40,000 loan from the government that was offered during the crisis. That's a personal guarantee too. If the company can't pay it back, it's going to fall on the person that fall on the director who took the loan. During the crisis, managing cash flow is critical. There's essentially two elements to managing the cash flow. One is you need to develop a cash flow model, something that looks like an income statement. It's projected out 3 months, and you want to be able to maintain flexibility in it to do sensitivity analysis. When's COVID going to end? How many employees, etc. Like all the questions that you might ask in developing a financial model. And it may even be an idea to hire a professional to assist with this. You want to see what your cash flow is over the next few months, and you want to be able to modify it and optimize it. The other thing is you need to conserve cash. If you're a business in trouble, you need to conserve cash, because we're experiencing, I look outside, we're experiencing a rainy day, and you've got to conserve cash to get past a rainy day. So I would say take advantage of the government programs. I didn't think there was anything wrong with taking the government loan, although it is personally guaranteed. But if you pay it off, you get to keep $10,000. I think you need to negotiate with your landlord. You need to get better terms from your suppliers, and work with your people to make sure that they're there with you, even temporarily laying people off when you have no work for them. But certainly, if there's one thing to manage, it's definitely you got to look at cash all the time. The other thing you want to do is seek assistance from your stakeholders, particularly if you have a secured lender. And I hope, and they know that they're dealing with an unprecedented situation just like you, and they want you to survive. I have a list of things that you should be asking for, but the one critical thing is that you get to your lender first. You don't want your lender to ask you, so what are you doing? And then you got to scramble. You should have a presentation ready for them. It should, show what you're going to do based on various scenarios, and show how you're going to get through this difficult time and thrive in the future. If you go to them with a plan, you definitely have a leg up rather than them calling you, and they want to know very badly that you have a plan. And I had someone who to approach me who ran a gym, and obviously any gym that has been closed for 2 or 3 months, they have issues with their loans, and they're probably in default on one of the covenants or many of the covenants. And the critical thing for me was that they develop a plan and they get to the bank before the bank starts asking them what's going on. I think we all know we're impressed when people take initiatives, and that's an initiative that you should definitely take. So now we're sort of getting into, and I'm going to go through this part a little quicker. This is the traditional items that you're looking at when you're making a plan of action for a company that's insolvent. You want to know, what are the cash flows? Is the management competent? That's a huge thing. Are there unencumbered assets that can be borrowed against to create liquidity? What liabilities are there? I can tell you, if you have source deductions, if you have huge source deductions owing, those have to be paid within 6 months of any restructuring. And it can really be difficult to restructure when you have, super secured debts like that. It's called a super priority. The nature of the industry is critical right now, as we know. Food and beverage, travel, tourism, those are all ones that are not that good to be in. And we got to really look, and the questions before were the ones we were asking in the last few slides, is what's the viability of the business? How can we make it viable is another question. Based on those factors, you come up with a plan of action. There's 5 here, but there's many variations of them. I'm going to say that I'm going to get into sort of the BIA proposal, which is restructuring legislation. I'm going to give you a quick overview because we're going to run out of time pretty quickly. But basically, there are other ways than using restructuring legislation to restructure, and there's certain times where it makes sense to maybe do a bankruptcy, repurchase the assets, have your spouse become the shareholder, and then start the business afresh with no liability. So bankruptcy can be used as a restructuring tool, and so can receivership. If you're a business owner, you should be, if you lend money to the business, you should be taking security back, and that security allows you the flexibility to actually do a receivership. A receivership is essentially a secured creditor remedy. It allows the secured creditor to take action to realize on the assets they're secured against. So it can be used flexibly. The one restructuring legislation I want to make you aware of is a notice of intention to file a proposal under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. And basically what it is it's initiated by the company having difficulties. It's essentially to make an offer to the unsecured creditors. So it allows you to have 30 days of protection from the creditors, no questions asked. You just have to give a list of liabilities and have a bankruptcy trust or a trustee, a licensed insolvency trustee act for you. It's a court supervised process, and you can get up to 6 months of bankruptcy protection. That's what we call bankruptcy protection. The formal term is a stay of proceedings, which is essentially a freeze on the creditor doing collection actions. And it allows you a period to stabilize your operations, restructure affairs, and negotiate terms of a proposal. And if you have more questions on this, I'm certainly available at any time to answer questions on it. But basically, the idea is, let's say you have $1 million of unsecured debt. You work to restructure your operations, perhaps, right size your workforce, get rid of any leases or contracts that are bad for you, And then you make an offer to your creditors. And often the offer can be 10% or 20% because your creditors, the stakeholders in the business, they'd rather have a customer in the end than get zero and have no future business. So our role in a filing like that would be we're an independent third party. We typically advise on the cash flow, how to file an NOI, and how to prepare the proposal, how to make the offer, and we also negotiate with the creditors. We monitor the companies that are the company that's going through the proposal. We chair any meetings, but definitely in order to have a successful restructuring, you need a business that could be profitable, which goes back to, like I said, really analyzing the situation and determining what the possibilities are on the other side. You need a committed and competent management. Restructuring's tough. It involves management playing a lot of roles. There's people that are going to call you. They're upset. They're not being paid. You got to deal with them. You got to deal with customers. You got to make everybody feel comfortable that we're going to be able to get through this. The other thing is liquidity. And like I said earlier, where liquidity is going to come from is a big question mark. I think the lenders are going to be a little scared to lend in this time. And I think that owners are going to have the same issues about pouring more money into a business under this environment. But liquidity is key in a restructuring. And the other thing is relationships with the stakeholders. If they view you as being dishonest from before, we have a lot of trouble restructuring. That's the number one reason why people vote against proposals. And I can remember doing one that I think we begrudgingly took on, and basically it was someone that was trying to make amends, but the business looked a little bit like a pyramid scheme, and people were mad that their money was gone and they voted against it. And that's typically if the creditors feel that you screwed them, they are not going to play fair in a proposal. There's different rights of different creditors. I want to point out CRAs before I get into being a licensed insolvency trustee. They have a super priority for source deductions, so wages at source. But the other thing that's key for you to understand is income tax goes away, and HST is an unsecured claim in a proposal. And if CRA agrees to a proposal, then you can write HST and many other director liabilities out of the proposal, and the director can come away with clean hands. So I'm just going to move on to, I do want to point out, we do business, but we also do consumer options. And often if a company has substantial debt, or there's a lot of personal guarantees for directors, we're talking about proposals and bankruptcies in the personal situation. So a little bit, I know I'm running out of time. Harris, you can cut me off. I think I'll be about 5 minutes on this. I just wanted to talk about, especially for the students out there, career as a licensed insolvency trustee. So our license, it comes from the federal government. And the focus of a licensed insolvency trustee, or at least our focus, is building solutions that are consistent with the needs, visions, and goals of ownership and individuals. We want to make businesses viable, enhance stakeholder value, and definitely we get huge, we feel best about ourselves when we're saving jobs. Our greatest satisfaction, and I remember someone walking by someone on the street and said, "Hey, that's the guy that saved my business." And that was the best feeling I think I could get out of being a licensed insolvency trustee. So how do you become a licensed insolvency trustee? You need a financial or legal background, at least a bachelor at a universities. The program to become a licensed insolvency trustee is run by CARP, which is my regulator. They're a Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals, but you need an employment at an LIT firm in order to join. You would then enter the CIRP qualification program, which is 2 exams. It's a core knowledge exam that's multiple choice, and a national insolvency exam that is a written practical exam. And then you would obtain your CIRP, which would allow you to go in front of the government for an oral board. An oral board has 2 government officials, a trustee and a lawyer, sitting in an oral board, and they give you a question and you have to present to them. And they determine whether you're competent enough to practice both in personal insolvency and commercial. So that's really how you become an LIT. The barrier is really getting employment at an LIT firm. In the personal practices, you're looking more at administrative duties and working your way up from there. The commercial firms, they do value a great financial or legal background, and you can get into some really interesting work like I had, I say 17 years ago when I was at Air Canada. It feels like deja vu because I feel like they're going to have to do something again. And there's lots of related roles in the industry. So special loans at the bank. The bank has a section, all the banks have a section that deals with troubled loans. There's many LITs work in those sections, but they're not all LITs, and it can be really interesting work. You're pushing the companies, but helping them to recover. Lenders, we know many of the lenders that deal to consumers when they're in distress, and there's many that lend to companies when they're in distress, and that's a really interesting role. You're monitoring the company, literally looking at their expenditures and their cash flow and your risk every day, and deciding how to deal with them. Sometimes the situation's bad, you need to pull the plug. Other times they get out of they work to profitability, get out of the program, and all of a sudden you're able to go to the client's able to go to a tier 1 bank, and you've done your job as a lender. Liquidators, there's a industry of people that sell stuff from insolvent companies. There's insolvency lawyers that practice just in this area. Of course, you need a law degree, but it's a very interesting life. And then on the consumer side, there's credit counselors who generally, I think the best ones are sort of the not-for-profits, and they work with clients to individuals to help them restructure their affairs, and they get the satisfaction of helping individuals, which we all can appreciate. So that is it for the presentation. I can take questions now. And Harris, if you have any questions that arose from the presentation, by all means, let me know.
Thanks, Adam. What a great presentation, and thank you for also covering off related careers, which is very much what we want you to do. And the question I think on everybody's mind is, certainly on my mind, is how can the government pay for all of this? The government is writing checks, stimulus, right? Both north and south of the border at a furious pace. So do you have any thoughts on that, Adam?
Well, I followed the Winklevoss twins on Twitter, and I know they're very excited about Bitcoin's prospects as the government's printing so much money. But certainly in Canada, I mean, we get incredible services from our government, but also incredibly expensive services. We're taxed at fairly high rates as individuals. So I don't know. I feel like I'm most in favor of raising the HST, but certainly collectively we're going to need to pay this off. I felt that one of the big mistakes over time was moving the HST from 7 to 5% because it decreased substantially the amount of money that our government was collecting. But maybe that'll be the first thing to change, which will be painful for the consumer. But you're right. I mean, they said in the last recession, I saw a quote yesterday, and they said in the last recession in 2008, the Great Recession, the U.S. federal government said, we're going to need to borrow billions to get out of this, in infrastructure projects and the like. And in this case, U.S. government's talking about trillions, and it's just mind-boggling. So it's
2 feet in the air then.
I think so.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We had an attendee ask about estate taxes. Have you heard any rumblings about the government, apart and aside, and bearing in mind I'm a lawyer by training and not an accountant, neither an accountant nor a licensed insolvency trustee, but it seems to me there are at least two options for government. One is estate taxes. The other is, I guess, a quick remedy, value-added tax, HST. But any rumblings on the estate tax side?
I mean, that is a good question. I think economists always are in favor of estate taxes if there's any method of taxing. I do think, like, we tend to look, when we're taxing, we tend to look how to tax so we affect as little as possible the middle class and the people living paycheck to paycheck. But on the same token, we don't want to discourage industry. But I haven't heard anything on estate taxes to date. But it seems like something that's politically feasible, and I wouldn't ignore any possibility at this point.
Thank you. Another interesting question came in that is really certainly not in my wheelhouse, but is in yours. And that is the question of negative interest rates. And it seems to be moving that way in the United States. Do you see Canada moving toward a negative interest rate climate? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, it was interesting. It's another interesting question. As the government, like particularly here in the States, as they're printing lots of money and sending it out to people that need it, people are talking a lot about inflation, but there's another part of the world that's saying, you know what, given everything that's going on, we need to be concerned about deflation and not inflation. So that's definitely a major thing. I think one thing's for certain, which I sort of felt at the Great Recession and even more now, is that I don't think interest rates are going to climb anytime soon. But I think definitely zero or below zero is a possibility. What does that look like? Oh God. It definitely won't provide any confidence from the consumer.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think, Harris?
No, well, I'm a layperson at this. I really, as a consumer, I wouldn't know what to make of it. I don't think any of us, certainly in your lifetime or mine, have lived through this. And so, it's certainly a very different paradigm. I'm looking, my training, my background is as an education lawyer. I act for investor groups. who will certainly be impacted by this, by a negative interest rate, if that is ultimately the scenario that plays out. And you raised a great point, which I confess to you I had not considered, which related to physical game changers, physical space. So there is obviously not only a lot of dialogue about distance education, but that is the new interim reality, in the education space. But as you pointed out, and I think you used massage therapy as an example, and I can tell you it is a great example, because you have to remember these schools, whether they are private career colleges or public institutions, they have more than one master. They have more than one regulator. So in the context of Ontario, it's not just the Ministry of Colleges and Universities that will tell them that they may use a capstone program in lieu of a practicum, for example. It's the professional governing body that comes back and says, presumably, and I think even they have 2 feet in the air, frankly, in many instances. This is all new to us. How can we adequately train massage therapists or paramedics, for example, if there's no practicum, or personal service workers for that matter. So a great point that you made, Adam, on that. And I might add that the one thing that most certainly will change in the context of schools are the agency letters that will be required or forthcoming. Fire and health inspections. And, if you have to space students out 6 feet apart, assuming that is acceptable, that is going to have a significant impact on many institutions that have to train in person. So we're gonna wrap up because we're getting close to the hour. But I want to thank you for a very insightful presentation during a very difficult period in humanity, Adam. And for everyone out there, I want to thank all of our attendees for viewing. We are going to host 24 town halls in 8 countries before December 31st, and many more in 2021. And our next session, I just want to say a little bit about our next session on May 29th, where you will meet an incredible woman who started a mask initiative in Johannesburg, South Africa. We're going to go all the way to Johannesburg. And her initiative created some 81,000 masks to date, and a gig economy, and it obviously saved many, many lives. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. Adam, thank you for your wonderful presentation today, which for the benefit of attendees, it will be posted on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you, Harris, for having me.
Thank you.